会镇压人民真火，今天胜利了。
为建设富强、民主、文明、和谐、美丽的社会主义现代化强国努力奋斗。
新年的歌谣唱啊唱啊，大伙儿脸上喜洋洋，大伙儿脸上喜洋洋。为什么喜洋洋？嘿嘿嘿嘿呀嘿，全中国要解放哦！嘿嘿嘿嘿嘿嘿嘿呀！新年的歌谣唱啊唱啊，大伙儿心里好喜欢，大伙儿心里好喜欢，多家人翻身呐！嘿嘿嘿呀嘿，过一个翻身年，嘿嘿嘿嘿嘿嘿嘿呀！
The People's Republic of China had been born. The question was, could it establish a strong foothold from which to stride forward? The eyes of the world were trained on the newly awoken giant in the east. The Kuomintang had left the country in ruins. The economy was in tatters. Financial speculation was rampant, and the majority of the population were destitute. The southwest, northwest, and border regions were infested with roaming groups of bandits, remnants of the defeated enemy. The challenge facing the new people's government was huge. To create a new China, first the old one had to be eradicated. Before a whole new society could be built, the mire of the old society would have to be thoroughly dredged. It was in 1928 that the clock on the old customs house on the Bund in Shanghai was first heard striking. Prior to 1949, much of China's wealth had been concentrated in a city that was an enduring stronghold of colonial capitalism. The new government, if it was to secure its hold on power, had to establish control over the economy. After Shanghai's liberation, Chun-Yi became its mayor. The city was still suffering the effects of runaway inflation, a result of Kuomintang mismanagement. The economy was being undermined by a number of illegally operating speculators who were deliberately keeping prices high. The stage was set for new China's first battle on the economic front. "24 commodity trade markets and 200 private banks and money houses were operating in Shanghai at the time. Around 300,000 people were involved in financial speculation. They traded silver dollars and foreign currency in blatant disregard of government decrees. They even insisted that although the People's Army had entered Shanghai, the people's currency, the renminbi, never would. The building at number 422 Hankou Road, built in 1934, housed China's first stock market. The tunnels and rooms were discovered during a renovation project in 2017. 70 years ago, this was a den of criminal activity that was undermining the economy of the new People's Republic. On June the 10th, 1949, the Shanghai Military Control Commission closed down the illegal stock exchange and arrested the people in charge. Immediately, the value of the silver dollar collapsed, and with it, the prices of grain and cooking oil. Wuhan, Guangzhou, and other cities carried out similar actions, closing down underground banks and money exchange shops. This campaign effectively put a stop to the illegal financial activity and cleared the way for the renminbi to enter freely into circulation. Just a fortnight after the founding of the PRC, another economic storm blew up. On October the 15th, commodity prices started skyrocketing. Over the next 50 days, prices across the country more than tripled, led by a sharp rise in grain prices in the north and textile prices in Shanghai. In the ensuing panic, some Shanghai-based reactionaries claimed that state control over the prices of grain, cotton yarn, and coal inevitably spelled disaster for the city. Chen Yun was head of the Central Finance and Economic Commission. Acting on a decision by the CPC Central Committee, he imposed controls on the flow of grain, cotton yarn, and coal across the country. On November the 25th, with inflation at its height, the CPC Central Committee ordered the large-scale sale of reserves of these commodities in all major cities. Prices plummeted, and many speculators were left bankrupt. By December the 10th, the government could claim victory in the war of rice and cotton. This victory strengthened the state's hand in economic management and brought stability to the market. By the spring of 1950, commodity prices were steadily declining across the country. The runaway inflation that had been a feature of old China had finally been halted. As Mao Zedong put it, stabilizing commodity prices and centralizing financial and economic management were as big an achievement as the victory over the Kuomintang in the Huaihai military campaign. The Peace Hotel in Shanghai is famous for its performances of jazz music. The building, which had originally housed the offices of a British trading company, was nationalized in 1949. Following liberation, the People's Government repealed the unequal treaties imposed by foreign powers and withdrew the economic privileges enjoyed by foreigners. It also confiscated the bureaucrat capital enterprises owned by 4 leading business families. In these and other ways, it secured control of the lifelines of the economy. And by establishing the General Administration of Customs, it obtained the keys to the gates of the country. The Bund was transformed from a foreign concession into a beautiful promenade that belonged to the people. In June 1950, the third plenary session of the 7th Central Committee of the Communist Party of China called for a fundamental improvement in the nation's financial situation within 3 years. In the early efforts to restore the national economy, a key element was land reform. China's farmers had always longed to own the land they tilled. Abolishing the ancient feudal land system was one of the greatest challenges facing the new People's Republic. The Land Reform Law was introduced in June 1950. It stipulates that the system of feudal exploitation by the landlord class should be abolished, and a system of land ownership by the farmers should be implemented. For thousands of years, the country's farmers had eked out a living from the land. Now, for the first time, they owned it. Beginning in 1950, land reform was enforced with vigor in the newly liberated areas. By the spring of 1953, all 300 million previously landless farmers in the liberated areas, with the exception of some ethnic minority regions, had been given land. The total area allocated to them was almost 50 million hectares. They also received machinery, tools, and seeds. Many could scarcely hide their joy. As masters of their own land, China's millions of farmers were eager to work hard and contribute to building a better country to live in. One farmer was so delighted with receiving his own land that he set up a wooden plaque inscribed with a poem. When the spring thunder sounded, we fought the landlord and took his land. Joyful farmers whose lives have changed are all grateful to Chairman Mao. Cuiheng village in Guangdong province was the birthplace of Sun Yat-sen. Under the leadership of the CPC, the villagers here finally realized the old revolutionary's dream. Following the land reform, the countryside was bursting with vitality. Irrigation works were built, draft animals and tools were acquired, and fertilizer was spread. In 1952, China produced 44.8% more grain than in 1949, as well as 193% more cotton and 64% more cooking oil. This reveals how powerful were the forces of production once liberated. With the economy recovering, China could fulfill the basic conditions needed to begin large-scale economic construction. Another new chapter was about to be written in the history of the young nation. The Chinese people, in order to consolidate their position in power, needed a stable social environment. But in some areas, bandits and counter-revolutionary forces loyal to the old regime were attempting to undermine the efforts to establish local governments. In the mountainous regions of western Hunan province, thousands of armed bandits had joined forces with remnants of the Kuomintang army. Together, they had formed the Hunan, Hubei, Sichuan, Guizhou Anti-Communist National Salvation Army. This old building, the headquarters of the local government, was attacked by bandits. Still today, bullet holes riddle the walls and doors, and evidence of grenade blasts can be seen on the stone slab above the entrance. The damage testifies to the ferocity of the battle. Mount Bamian stands at the point where the provinces of Hunan, Hubei, and Sichuan meet. A local group of bandits established their headquarters here, in Yanzi Cave. This opening in the sheer cliff could house several hundred men. On January the 21st, 1951, a PLA unit rappelled down the cliff from the top of the mountain. The bandits were taken completely by surprise and were quickly cleared from their nest. The operation received strong local support. This photograph shows a villager reporting to the PLA soldiers. Across the country, war was waged on bandits. In total, 2,600,000 of them were killed, wounded, or captured, or surrendered. By 1953, the mission was all but complete. A history of lawlessness that had for decades dealt destruction and threatened peace and social stability was ended. A martyr's memorial stands on Mount Yun'an. Here, for the past 70 years, the local villagers have held an annual ceremony honoring those who died in the Battle of Wulian Cave. 88-year-old Chu Jifu is a regular visitor to the memorial. He comes to remember one of his friends, PLA soldier Wang Jianbiao. Wang was killed in the battle, and his body fell down the precipice. Afterwards, Chu Jifu, who was a teenager at the time, descended the cliff with some other villagers and recovered his friend's mangled remains. The old man can't recall those events without succumbing to tears. Victory Park in Shanxi County is famous throughout China. It celebrates a victory over bandits in Yuanling in August 1952. The dark days are long past, but people here are still grateful to those who gave their lives so that they might live in peace. A memorial stands on a nearby hill. It commemorates the martyrs who defeated the bandits and whose souls are resting among these green hills. In the early days of the People's Republic, an estimated 600,000 Kuomintang spies and other counter-revolutionaries were in hiding in the country, along with around 600,000 members of reactionary parties. In opposing the people's government, their policy was to bide their time and wait for opportunities to carry out sabotage and assassinations. In 1950 alone, they murdered some 40,000 cadres and civilians in the liberated areas. When Mao Zedong embarked on a visit to the Soviet Union in early December 1949, spies in Beijing reported his movements to the Kuomintang Secret Service in Taiwan. But the message was intercepted by the Chinese military. In the early morning of February the 26th, 1950, investigators entered a residence in central Beijing. It was the home of a Kuomintang spy named Ji Jiaoxiang. They found a radio, a code book, and an American-manufactured handgun. Simultaneously, in Beijing and Tianjin, another dozen arrests were made. This was the first major espionage case since the founding of the People's Republic. In the heart of a cluster of theaters and museums in southern Beijing lies Tianqiao Square. 70 years ago, people would regularly come here to enjoy a variety of entertainment. But the area was also a hotbed of vice left over from the old society. Mao Zedong told Minister of Public Security, Luo Ruijing, the People's Republic will not tolerate rampant prostitution and crime. It was a position that enjoyed popular support. Before long, Tianqiao was cleared of its decadent activities. Before Beijing was liberated, the narrow alleys of the Dashola area had housed nearly 100 brothels. Cracking down on prostitution was vital in liberating China's women. Just 1 week after the People's Republic was founded, the second meeting of the Beijing People's Congress decided that all brothels in the city should be closed down. That same night, in an operation involving 2,400 cadres and police officers in 27 teams, all Dashola's brothels were raided and shut down. Subsequently, 1,260 women were sent to reform schools. There, they received medical treatment and began a new life. The makeup and revealing dresses of the brothels were replaced by ordinary clothes and big smiles. In major cities across China, a total of 8,400 brothels were shut down. Thousands of former prostitutes were taught new skills and became productive workers.
纯粹的积累一声响，就咱们打开地狱的门，共产党就咱们出火坑，姐妹们从此得解放。
There was no greater liberation than that of the people. The Ping opera Liu Jiao Er was hugely popular at the time.
小儿我自幼儿，许配赵家。我和柱儿不认识，我怎能嫁他呀？我的爹在区上已经把金推呀，这一回我可要自己找婆家呀。
On May 1st, 1950, the new government issued its first law, the marriage law. Under it, the unequal system of feudal marriage that had been practiced for thousands of years was abolished. Women were given the freedom to choose their husband. Now that couples could marry for love, weddings became occasions of great joy. It was said that the women of China appeared younger and prettier than before. Women were becoming actively engaged in socialist construction. In many industries, female workers were given jobs alongside the men. Tian Guiying was China's first woman train driver. On International Women's Day, March the 8th, 1952, the People's Republic's first group of female pilots were honored in Beijing. Women flying across the skies of the motherland was a cause for national celebration. On February the 24th, 1950, the government launched a crackdown on the use of opium. The response across the country was immediate. The poisonous smoke that had polluted China since the Opium War was finally cleared away. In 1949, 400 million out of China's 540 million people couldn't read or write. This situation was a major impediment to economic and social progress. So, a countrywide anti-illiteracy movement was launched. In the Southwest Military Area Command, cultural officer Qi Jianhua developed a new teaching method. He showed that by using phonetic symbols, students could learn several hundred new characters a day. His lively approach to teaching was popular among the soldiers he taught, and by March 1952, all of them could read. On April the 23rd that year, Qi was given an award by the National Education and Culture Committee. A commentary in People's Daily called on the entire country to adopt his teaching method. As a result, the anti-illiteracy movement made significant progress.
出呀嘛出星星，放呀嘛放光明，放光明，学习二字嘛认的清，认的清。不识字不知道大事情，旧社会俺不识字，糊里糊涂的受人情。社会人做了当家的人，这样的下子怎么能行？学习那文化最有当今的嘛哎哟，学习那文化最有当今的嘛哎哟。
In the 1950s, it was common for people on their way to literacy class to hum the song, Husband and Wife Learn to Read. The anti-illiteracy movement significantly raised the Chinese people's level of education. In Beijing, the efforts continued to cleanse the city of the problems left behind by the old society. Longxu Ditch, known as the Dragon's Beard, it got its name because it began near the Temple of Heaven, where in the past the emperors, who were associated with dragons, offered sacrifices to heaven. Because it traversed lower ground, much of Beijing's wastewater gathered in it, turning it into a stinking, fly-infested open cesspool. The odor could be smelt nearly a kilometer away, yet its banks were crowded with dwellings belonging to the city's poorest inhabitants. In 1950, with the eager support of the local population, the municipal government set about renovating the area. The open ditch was diverted underground and an asphalt road was laid over it. Across the city, other improvement work was being carried out. In some Beijing streets, there were garbage dumps dating back to the Qing dynasty. At the northwestern corner of the Forbidden City, there was one several meters high. As part of a patriotic health movement, a voluntary campaign was launched in which new sewers were laid and the capital was cleared of centuries of accumulated garbage. Beijing was clean again. The cleansing process served to reinvigorate its inhabitants. They could see what the flourishing new China would look like. After returning to China from the US and seeing the changes in Beijing, the dramatist Lao She was inspired to write the play Longxu Ditch.
毛主席爱人民，叫他们干个净净儿，大翻身，修好了沟，又给修路，叫咱劳动人民也能挺着腰板卖大布。卖大布，你心喜欢您可别忘生产，那多出力，那多流汗，得人人争取做模范。新中国，那新北京，国泰民安，享太平。
Just before National Day 1950, the musician Wang Shan traveled from Tiananmen Square to Tianjin. Moved by the sight of the fluttering five-star red flags, he wrote a song. It's still sung by the Chinese people today.
是多么的幸运，降生在